the Chinese ambassador then. Dawn Butler, if Jeremy Corbyn doesn't get a private meeting or meetings with the Chinese president, will he raise the matter at the state banquet?
I spoke to Jeremy's office today. He will be having a private meeting with President Xi, and he will be discussing human rights and human rights violations. So that meeting will go ahead. He will have the meeting. It will be a private meeting. So I doubt very much that after the meeting he'll come out and say what happened. But be assured that he will have the meeting and he will raise the issues.
Right, so you don't think he'll then go ahead and raise it at the state banquet, as the Chinese ambassador is warning him not to do so?
I don't think it's a case of, you know, Jeremy being warned not to do something. I think that's more likely to have the opposite effect with somebody like Jeremy. But I think the point is that if he's going to have a private meeting and raise all the issues and to hopefully have an in-depth discussion with him, then that should, I would imagine, that may well suffice.
Will it suffice, or should it be raised at the state dinner?
Well, I think it would be wrong if he turned up at the dinner in a Free Tibet T-shirt. I'm sure he's not going to do that.
No.
But I think he's well within his rights to raise the issue. Look, but you know, China is not brilliant when it comes to human rights, but I think we have to make sure we're not too high-minded about this. When you've got a trade deficit of 5% a year, you need the capital to come from somewhere. The price you pay for economic uncompetitiveness is that you end up having to go to countries like China for the investment.
Right. I mean, Liam Fox, shouldn't the Prime Minister be raising this issue publicly, if not privately? He is the Prime Minister, after all. He is the one who is, to some extent, you know, hosting the Chinese president along with the Queen. He upset the Chinese when he met the Dalai Lama in 2012. So he doesn't seem to be scared of raising these issues.
Well, the Prime Minister's obviously made a major point by meeting the Dalai Lama, so it did register big time in China. But one of the reasons that you want to build relations with countries is so that you can have some leverage. If you simply say, we're not talking to X country, you don't have any ability to change and shape what they're doing. And so it makes sense for us to have a strong trade relationship with China. As Douglas says correctly, we have to have capital investment coming from somewhere. If that relationship is strong enough, it gives us the ability to be able to raise these issues. And I would expect them to be raised fairly robustly in private.
Right, but what about publicly? I mean, Barack Obama did so in the US state visit. Why doesn't he do it publicly?
The question is where you think you're getting most effect, and it's whether you're actually trying to achieve change or why you're trying to achieve an effect for an audience.
Well, Dawn Butler?
I think it's more important that the Prime Minister raises it publicly so the country knows where the Prime Minister stands than it is for the Leader of the Opposition in Jeremy Corbyn raising it privately. So I think it's more important. And I also think probably the discussions last week in regards to China building nuclear power plants, you know, needs to be discussed, because people may think he's not raising it because he wants to get the money from China, which would be wrong.
Isn't the story about China really the amount of progress there's been? This is a country that was responsible for the Cultural Revolution and all the sort of murderousness of the past. It is now producing an economy that is integrated, part of the global economy. It's wonderful to see our universities in the capital of London full of middle-class Chinese who come here to study and to visit. That's the face of China.
What about the dangers?
Except that yesterday the Chinese ambassador was talking about human rights and how human rights have improved in China, but his definition was entirely about economic progress. It has to go hand in hand with a wider concept of rights, of equality across race and gender, and also it has to be about the independence of the judiciary.
Correct.
All these things have to come. So we can't isolate one element of it without considering the others.
Let's move on from human rights as an issue to raise with the Chinese president to cyber espionage, to the worry and fear of many people of allowing the Chinese in to a very sensitive part of industry, the nuclear industry, for example, and reports today that GCHQ will be setting up some sort of surveillance of the Chinese to prevent them launching a cyber attack on us. I mean, is that really the road we want to go down? Well,
people talk about these different elements as though they can be disaggregated, but actually cyber crime, cyber espionage, cyber warfare are part of a continuum. One of the risks is in dealing with a power like China is that they will actually put malware into your system that you may not detect as there. Now, last year, JP Morgan in the United States went for 2 months without even discovering that there was malware in their server, and they had a huge number of their clients compromised. Now, very often you wouldn't know that was there until it had been activated.
Right, but then are you saying, I mean, in your book, Rising Tides, you quote one unnamed figure in Hong Kong who suggests the West is so seduced by what it sees in terms of economic growth in China that it can't see what lies beneath. Is that the current Conservative government?
I think that we have to take the two things into account. Yes, there are benefits of trade, but that should not blind us to the risks that we potentially would face.
But should the government be pursuing this sort of engagement in trade with the nuclear industry?
It should be engaging up to a point, but for
example, how do you do that?
Well, for example, when it comes in terms of the control of the software that actually would control the usage, you have to have guarantees on that. I would be happier if the central elements of that came from the United Kingdom. I can't see the Americans being very happy about an arrangement where the software that would actually do that actually came from China.
So you're not happy with the current arrangement as it is?
I think we have to question it.
Right. I mean, is it just about the money, do you think? With George Osborne, he has been at the forefront of embracing all this, is it?
On the nuclear deal, I think it's a terrible deal in commercial terms for this country. We're paying a huge subsidy, in effect, guaranteeing China and a French company a certain share of tax revenue going on for 30, 40 years. It's a bad commercial deal, but that's a separate consideration.
Right. I mean,
what interests me about what Liam just said, it seems like you're at odds with your Chancellor, which actually I think is a good thing, because obviously MI5 has said they're very concerned about China and Russia being involved in any sort of such deals, especially within the nuclear industry. So it sounds like you're at odds with your Chancellor, which I think you're putting the safety of the country first, which is a good thing.
Well, I think we have to be... there's a difference between building the infrastructure and having control of the software in terms of its operation. So it's a lot more complex than I think we've seen.
But we could build the infrastructure. We used to be the leaders in the building of nuclear.
The problem is not the infrastructure.
We could build the infrastructure ourselves. We could
that's
be
not the problem.
innovative.
The problem in terms of security would lie in the software that controlled its operation. That's where the risk would come.
What about the American response to this new relationship, this golden era that David Cameron is talking about? I mean, the Financial Times reports a former senior American official as saying this is a case study in how to kowtow. Is that how they view it?
Well, as President Obama himself said that he was less concerned with what was happening in Europe and he wanted a pivot to Asia. So it seems to me what's good for one's good for the other.
All right, we'll leave it there.